So the topic of class today, which I texted out, is this idea of balancing order and chaos, and trying to find that middle ground between them. Of course, it's inspired by the Torah first and foremost, and I think we have to start in the Torah whenever we're trying to think things through in life. My son just recently, he was like, I'm going to mention my son a few times. He's in the room next door. He could probably hear me. But one of the things that, he was just talking about a lot of issues that he's thinking through in his life, like big issues, politics, religion, decision-making. And I felt a little confused, not because my dialogue is always so Torah based. I don't, and I'm not saying it as a compliment to myself. I'm saying I don't know how to make decisions without consulting with the Torah, I would say. But I do think it's a helpful practice. So I think it really does work. And I love the moral center that I could find in the Torah, and the intensity of the focus it brings to the way I think things through, and also it's almost like this almost easy clarity and logic where people make things very confusing. But I find that the Torah, it doesn't say that life isn't confusing. It has a path forward. So let's just look together for a minute at what the past couple of weeks have been about. We started Sefer Bimidbad. Sefer Bimidbad, very famously, is like it's split into two sections. Like the rabbis say, like there's section 1 and section 2. They almost feel like they're two different books. And the reason that they feel like there are two different books is that in the beginning of Sefer Bimidbad, it's all about order. Okay, it's very organized, and the way it starts is with the counting of the people, and it talks about their placement in the camp and where they belong and what their position is. And it's so nice. And the analogy I like to use is like, you remember when you cleaned out your closet, or did you ever have a mom who said a place for everything and everything in its place? Such a nice feeling, like when you decide to like empty that drawer and now there's just keys in it and 3 pens because you threw out the pens that didn't work, right? You're like, look, and then people come over and you're like, hi, how are you? Come look at this drawer for a second. I just want to show it to you. And they're like, wow, you're amazing. Look at you. But there's nothing quite like that feeling of organizing your life and getting rid of the clutter and the chaos and everything making sense, and you only have 3 skirts because the other skirts don't fit and you're not going to buy anymore because what is materialism anyway? Is it just me? You know what I'm talking about. So that's gorgeous, and that's how the Torah starts. The Sefer Bimidbad starts. It starts with each tribe has a section, north, south, east, and west. In the center is the Mishkan, but really the Aron. It's not, the Aron HaKodesh. So in the sense, here are each nation, each tribe has their spot, and the Leviim are in the center, and their focus is the protection of the Aron. But then there's checks and balances so that no tribe feels that it has true ascendancy. Like some people are going to say, oh, the Leviim were better. But in fact, the Leviim have a life of service, and they are very much dependent on the other tribes. They can't make a living for themselves. They're not going to own land. And each tribe will have its own functions and its own way of being. It's not structured as a pyramid, right? There's no hierarchies in place. And it feels beautiful, and it resonates that way. And that's the whole beginning of the Sefer. It feels like the nation is united, and we understand what our goals are. And it doesn't mean, I'm going to come back to some of this, it doesn't mean that we're all identical or the same. And this feels like an important point to me because a lot of chaos, I think, emerges from the challenge of living with difference, right? Of living in a state where not everyone is you. I always think about marital fights this way, that I always think of a fight between spouses is often a fight when you like dig down and you look into it. It's like a fight between 2 different upbringings almost. Like, this is what we did in my house. We always We always eat by my mother Friday night, and you only eat by your mother Saturday. That's not what we do. That's not what we do. And so when two different families come together in a marriage, a lot of marital conflict is about, I can't live with somebody who's not me and who doesn't agree with me about everything and think I'm right and perfect and beautiful all the time. Yes, 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 nodding. No, okay, just me. But these are things that make things challenging. What I love about the Torah is it doesn't say that when the nation reaches this peak of order and unison, it doesn't erase the tribal differences. It still has Reuven, Shimon, Levi, like they still exist that way, but they within those spheres of themselves, they know how to operate together. They know how to move together forward as a family while maintaining those distinctions. How quickly does that fall apart in the Torah? The answer is too quickly. So there we are, it's all gorgeous. And then the next minute, in this week's parasha, which you'll read this weekend, that's when chaos begins. And the Torah from here on in Sefer B'Midbar, is going to list a series of revolts, rebellions, uprisings, complaints, people feeling wronged, people feeling upset, people fighting, people going to war. That's going to be a lot of what we see going forward. And the reason primarily, and actually before I say the reason, I was actually going to throw this to the class for a minute. So I'll just remind you of some of these complaints. If you're like, what is she referring to? Which parts of the Torah is this? So the first complaint is going to be about the lack of food and a lack of water and a lack of sustenance. And they're going to get really angry at Moshe, and they're going to blame him, and they're going to say it's better if we died in the desert. But right on the heels of that is going to be the story of Aaron and Miriam, his brother and sister, talking about him behind his back and basically dismissing Moshe's leadership abilities and saying, why does he think he's better than us? And that's going to go into the Miraglim, and it's going to go into Korach. Okay, just so you know, that's what we're in. That's the chaos that we're in. My son came to me, I think just randomly, not because he was necessarily thought I had the right answer, but he said, Mommy, what do you think the root of all evil is? I thought it was such a good question. By the way, this weekend, if you want to do a little activity with your children, have that conversation. It's just an interesting conversation to have. Like, where does it all, like, what's the root of all evil? I don't think there should be one answer. I had one answer. If anybody wants to just type it into the chat, I'm just curious, like, does anybody have a quick answer to that? Like, what they think the root of all evil is? I'll tell you some answers we had. There you go. The first answer was power, and then hatred and jealousy and a bad heart, a lot money, jealousy, yes, ego, and then I see ego, and greed. I'm gonna combine selfishness, yes, pride, yeah. So here I'm gonna combine some of these answers. What I told my son is that I believe that the root of all evil is unregulated ego. I didn't say ego on its own because I actually don't think there's anything wrong with having an ego. It sort of goes back to that idea of the idea that the Torah says you're allowed to have an identity. You're allowed to be different from one another. You're allowed to be your own self, right? You're allowed to be the tribe of Benjamin. Nobody wants to erase that part of you. What goes wrong according to Torah, and the Torah is so consistent about this that it's astounding, actually. What goes wrong for people is when that ego is unregulated and when it's defined incorrectly, when it is too sensitive, when it is flawed, when it feels hurt. So I like, some people were asking for a book club on East of Eden, which I did, I think 2-3 years ago. Everybody should read East of Eden. It's one of the best books, John Steinbeck, but a bunch of people are reading it now for reasons that I don't know. But in East of Eden, I think John Steinbeck does a good job of analyzing the Torah, where he tries to figure out the story of Cain and Abel. But going back to Cain and Abel is always important, because everything was fine. And then the older brother saw the younger brother getting preferred, and his ego became unregulated. He felt insecure. He felt unloved. He felt that he didn't, that people were looking down on him. And there's where all of our other answers start to come in. The idea of a loss of power, or a loss of a sense of ascendancy or primacy, right? The loss of a feeling of I'm in charge and I'm in control. These feelings, according to the Torah, lead to chaotic reactions by people. And the ideal that the Torah tries to move the nation into, and it does it in this week's parasha actually, is it tries to talk a lot about Moshe. It keeps trying to bring Moshe to the forefront as an example of, well, how do you regulate these feelings and these emotions? So some people try to regulate it with getting more power, by getting more money, by becoming more beautiful, by exerting their force upon others, by putting other people down. Does everybody, like, you know that Zoom is so hard because you talk to screens. Do you hear what I'm saying? The Torah starts with order, and that order is about people feeling that they understand their place and that everybody's unified and we're all equal. And it comes into a state of chaos the moment people start to dysregulate around those feelings, okay? And then the way the Torah is going to try to channel the conversation is to talk about Moshe. And it's going to say, listen, Moshe's number one quality is his humility. Humility, I often feel, is a misunderstood concept. I think some people think that being humble means to push yourself down, to be overly modest, to cover yourself up, to somehow erase yourself. I don't think that that's what the Torah talks about when it talks about humility. Moshe's humility is seen in so many examples. This week's parasha, another example, and the next week again. This week's parasha, there's a revolt, okay? Everybody's angry at Moshe. Moshe turns to God and he says, I don't know what to do. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I can't believe you gave me this job. This is hell. I'm not doing it anymore. And God, with his great mercy, understands, and he sends Moshe help by inspiring more leaders, okay? And we call them, it's like the 70 elders arise. The idea that he doesn't have to do it alone, that there are people, that there will be other leaders with him. And Yehoshua, and at this point, so there are people prophesying in the camp because of this. And they gain prophecy. And Yehoshua comes running to Moshe and he says, oh my God, what are we going to do? There are people prophesying all over the place. We have to put them in jail. Like, this is not good. You're the only prophet. And Moshe's answer is, my only dream is that everyone should be a prophet. That's his dream. And when his siblings are going to complain about him, he's not going to answer their complaints and their anger with anger. Instead, he answers with humility. When his sister is punished for her actions with Sarat, Moshe immediately says, El narfana la. He doesn't think in his brain, she deserved it. She had it coming to her. And this is good. It's good to be punished. His humility says, there's enough space here for all of us. My ego doesn't need you to be small for me to have any say. It's okay. We could do it together. I'm good with that. That is a very, very hard place to reach. I want it. Next week is Palotra. Right. Yeah. Why? Vivian, am I quoting it wrong?
This week we're in Parashat Naso because it was Shavuot, so we didn't
Right,
read
but
Nassau
bad,
in
so
full.
right.
So
We're
we
ahead.
skipped
I'm
Nassau,
jumping. I'm
but
jumping the gun.
but in Israel, then Bill Howard.
Thank you. But either way, I don't even want to talk about this week, next. You're right. You're right. But I'm actually I want to project even further into Bimidbad when Korach is going to come up against Moshe, and Moshe is going to have to maintain his humility. He's going to have to maintain his humility in the face of nonsense. I just want you guys to understand that. In the face of absurdity, the things that Moshe is going to, the people that are complaining against Moshe are not worthy of his humility, but he always maintains it. So where are we going with all of this? I was thinking a little bit, not a little bit, I think about this all the time. I want to say a story, but I don't want to use names. So I'm going to just think about how to say this story. I was talking to someone about sitting down at a table to discuss something, okay? And the answer I got was, we can't sit down at the table to discuss it. That person is my enemy. They have done so many things that I hate. I'm so angry at them. I'm not sitting down with them. Okay. First thing I want to say is I do understand that when you're feeling really angry at someone and you feel that somebody is not a partner, right? You feel like the person in front of you is not on your side or on your team or having your best interest in mind. What I find that people like to do is they like to go to their camps, okay? They want to go to be, I am Reuven, you are Yehuda, and we are not aligned, and we don't have a conversation that we have to have with each other. We don't see things the same way, and you've done me wrong so frequently. What we know when we're logical, and I'm telling you that story, we know that that's not a path forward. Does everybody know that? I feel that the Torah is pretty clear about this, and that human logic and human reason is pretty clear about it. It's not a way forward to say, I can't be in a conversation with these people. I can't discuss this. This is, you're wrong, I'm right. You're crazy, I'm not. Humility says, I don't have all the information. I don't know what made you feel the way that you felt to elicit the things that happened that I felt upset about. I don't have complete knowledge and understanding about anything. So human beings should be able to reach a place where they can come together and really talk about the things that are bothering them and the things that are difficult for them. The people I love most in the world are comedians. I say this, well, I love comedians. You know why comedians are great? Their job is to figure out what is common to all human beings and reveal it. So they're going to talk about, like, what do you do when there's only one square of toilet paper left? They're like, we all know that this is something that happens to us, but nobody wants to talk about it, right? So they'll find that thing. They'll find all those weird, like, I'm thinking about Seinfeld. I think he's really good at it. But great comedians in general, they find that weird stuff that no matter who you are and where you live, you know that this is what it means to be a human being. Let's not kid, like, let's find that common humanity, right? So, and now I'm going to layer this one more time. What I have been feeling lately is that things feel more divisive and chaotic than usual. And there's 100 million reasons for that. But one thing that struck me that I was noticing for myself, this doesn't have to be about you, was a lot of the chaos and divisiveness for me was coming from the fact that I was speaking to people via text. People are posting things on Instagram, people are posting things on WhatsApp. And what that doesn't yield is a face-to-face real conversation, right? It's just people throwing things at each other. But, you know, like Martin Buber always says, Martin Buber is the author of I and Thou. And so much of his work is about how people communicate with one another. And he just feels like communication without like without eye contact and without like a state of listening, it falls apart. So I definitely feel, and I feel this way for a very long time, especially with teenagers, the degree to which teenagers will hurt each other in a WhatsApp chat is astounding. They will say things to each other that they would never have said in person, but the distance of technology gives them the right. Now, I'm going to speak a little bit about current events, because something that was very, very scary for me recently was I follow a lot of different WhatsApp chats, and I'm on Instagram. I don't use Instagram myself because I think I'm too old. I'm not too old. I know older people than me use it. But I'll say, like, for the record, I've never used an emoji. Like, that's like a point for me. Like, have never used one. If I have to, I always try to find words rather than using an emoji. It's the English teacher in me that feels like, why are we going back to pictogram conversations? Like, we have language, it evolved. Like, and if I feel like it's reductive, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Use your emojis, but for myself, I'm very careful about it. And so even when I use Instagram, maybe I'll publicize a book club, but I always feel weird about like pictures of my family and sharing that way. I've never got very comfortable, but I do look at it a lot. And here are some things that I saw in relation to the civil unrest and to the killing of George Floyd, which we're all very familiar with. And something that was weird for me was, I want to say this. I know that everybody that I care about and that is close to me and that I respect is horrified by the story and by what happened. And I think I'm gonna say it like that because the alternative is not something I'm willing to even think about. But I want to say everybody knows it was something very wrong happened. I even will go so far as to say that everybody knows that. I'll pause. This year, I think it was this year, I did a book club at the center around the book called The Guest Book. Was anybody there? It was a book about, it started about the Nazis and the Jews, but it evolved to be a book about, in general, how people hate each other and racism. And by the time we were all done with the book, there were 30 of us sitting in the center. We all looked at each other and said, we're all racists. Like, we are all filled with bias. We make judgments about each other. It's not always about skin color. Sometimes it's about, a lot of it, I'm going to tell you, in this community, a lot is about money, looking down on people that don't have as much, don't appear as much. It's a huge problem. The idea of a hierarchy of some people being better than others and thinking that that betterness is like inherent in them is prevalent, and it is everywhere. So here I am on Instagram, and I'm saying to myself, everybody knows this, and everybody knows that these things are unhealthy and need to be changed. And yet, and I'm going to say the quotes out loud because I want you to know the other side, those of us who don't understand this, that there were people posting in a Jewish Instagram chat, okay, Jews, things like, this is what you get, Abraham Lincoln. What does that mean? And I know maybe everybody in this class is saying, that's crazy, but it's there and it wasn't deleted, all right? People saying things like, I guess this is why we had slavery. What does that mean? Who writes that in 2020? People wrote the most horrifying things. All of the old dialogue, like language that we shouldn't be using about Schwarzes and Abid and look and the animals and the thing. And then I was feeling, Judaism's message. We just came out of Shavuot, and there's no lack of clarity from the Torah around these issues, where the Torah says, when people are different from you and weird and other, that's when you have to be the most on top of your humility, your emotions, and your ego. That's when you have to be the most careful. That's not when you are the least careful. You can't go around looking down at a Moabite poor woman because you think she doesn't belong in your society somehow. Your job is actually to go above and beyond and to figure out what your personal responsibility is in that moment. Our class last week was about how Boaz, you see, not Boaz. Boaz thought he was the best guy, but actually he was just doing tzedakah. There was more that he could have done. It wasn't enough what he had done. So what I find, though, that's stopping the people I love and respect from engaging in this way is that things have become too complicated for them. Like, well, these are not our friends. They wouldn't be there for us. They don't like us. We're not on the same page. They're part of a group that I can't affiliate with. There's a lot of the language around why we cannot sit at a table and have a conversation. A lot of the language is, I refuse to sit at the same table and have this conversation. In no uncertain terms, I'd like to emphasize that is not what the Torah believes is a path forward. And that is the message I have to give myself for my own life. I was reading Rabbi Sachs on Bimidbad, and he said something that as an educator, I believe, which is that everything starts with education. But when I say education could be a lot of things. So I just want to tell two stories. One is, my children and I are readers. It just happened. We love to read. But one of the benefits of being a reader, I really believe, is that it is the heart of an education. Somebody who reads a lot, not a little, just everything, inherently, your brain says, I've lived in a lot of different brains. I've stepped in a lot of different shoes. Life is so complicated. Other people are so complicated. Our humanity is the only thing that binds us. We have to keep finding that commonality. We have to work towards it. My children, I find when they're reading, like we're not even having a dialogue so much, but they have a sense of right and wrong that emerges from moderation, from a sense of shared humanity. It's not about politics or taking sides. It's just about what feels allowed and not allowed for one human being to do to another human being, right? I spoke to the head of our English department, and she was talking about how she's going to be inserting some different texts into the curriculum because maybe we're not doing a good enough job as a school around educating around race and differences. And I said, and the truth is, that's where the conversation starts. It's not a forced conversation. It's not, and this I reject. There's no one right way to speak about this or to say anything about this. It's not like if you use that language, you're a bad person. It's, are you a learner? Are you being a learner around this? Are you opening yourself up to researching and to thinking and to exploring and to engaging? I spoke for a very long time. I can't believe it's already 1:34. I'm sorry. I had a lot of thoughts and feelings about this. It doesn't feel like the end to me. I was talking to my brother the other night, and what we came to together in a long conversation, we don't always agree with each other at all, but we love each other. And I think if we would have conversed I know this, if we would have had this conversation over text, we would have fought. But because we picked up the phone and actually spoke to each other on the phone, we got somewhere. And what we got to was the fact that we both feel that something in the past couple of years has been happening in our society. And we called it like the decline of civil discourse, the decline of moderation, the decline of the ability to not be labeled, okay? And I'm gonna end on this. Sometimes I feel, like, let's say I just gave a class and I said, and I don't know what message you're taking out. The message I'm trying to say is find your shared humanity. Do not judge other people. Don't assume that you have the whole story. And if you're not acting with an extension of kindness and understanding and humility, I don't know if we're doing what the Torah, I don't know. We are not doing what the Torah asks us to do, okay? If in your chat rooms and in your WhatsApp chats, you are allowing people to engage in overtly racist dialogues, that's not okay. You have to find a way to move, to shift that. It's your own family, it's your own group. That's something that you need to think about. There's no, there should be no confusion around this. Honestly, I don't understand it that well. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. Oh, here's the thing. What bothers me as a Jew and as a human being is when people generalize, stereotype, and label. When people say things like Jews are, I'm just like, Jews are, you never even met me, right? You are, all of you must be. Here's a law that applies to all of you. For myself, sometimes I feel like people say, well, you're a liberal, which by the way, I don't even know if I'm not. I don't think I am. You're a liberal, so everything you say could be dismissed as being overly liberal, right? That's not sensitive to my humanity, by the way. You're a woman. I have to talk about being a woman for a minute in the midst of this, because there's a lot of women on this chat. It's not only women. I love the part of Zoom that has opened this class up. Because I am a woman, when I say certain things in meetings, guys, this is not my imagination. It is real. It is dismissed as coming from a woman's mouth, right? I'm generalized. I am lumped in with all women. I went into a classroom and there was people talking about how women are frail and weak, and that's why only men should be president. It's 2020. That is a real conversation that people are still having. Do you understand? What are we doing around educating our children that individuals are unique and should be treated as unique, that human beings are unique and should be treated as unique? And the minute that you start labeling and generalizing, you are probably entering unhealthy, dangerous territory. This is the message of the Torah. It says, be you. I'm never going to take your identity away. You're unique. You're wonderful. The rest of your job on this earth is not letting your you-ness, your sense of I, cause harm and pain and suffering to anybody else. And on top of that, that's the negative. The positive is, how are you helping your fellow man? How are you increasing good in this earth? I mean, I could think of a million ways of people that I know right now who are doing this. I'm thinking I'm going to shout out for my brother-in-law, Jack, during coronavirus, if any of you have interacted with him over coronavirus. He is a voice of calm and reason and intellect and trying to help people and guide them to safety and to a good place. He never does it from condemnation. He only does it for the good. I'm thinking of my cousin, Eddie Esses, if you're out there. You know, he brings politicians of all different backgrounds to come and speak to the community so that they could hear different voices and experience different ideas. And as a result, people get angry at him. They say, how could you say that? How could you listen to that? That never makes sense to me. Disagree. You don't have to agree, but don't shut your ears and eyes to the rest of the world. You have to be part of the conversation. Otherwise, you're just living in an echo chamber. And guess what? The next time you're going to want somebody to listen to you and hear your voice and hear your platform, don't be surprised and say, how could it be that nobody cares? How could it be that nobody's listening? We as a nation of people, we need to be the ones who carry this for the world. It's a burden we have. We should be living up to the highest standards of righteous and good and humble behavior. All right. Natalie is saying, as Jews, we don't understand the violence which is driving these negative reactions. Appreciating Ruth and the other was valuing kindness. I agree. I didn't engage in too many details because I don't think the same way I don't think anyone disagrees that what happened to George Floyd was horrific. I don't know anyone who's saying, I think looting is a great idea. Those are the heroes. I mean, Does anybody say, I mean, that's not part of the conversation. That is not good. That's evil behavior. The point I was trying to make, though, is, are we going to then use one label for everything? Do you see how dangerous that's going to be for us? Because yes, there are evil people, but there are also good people. There are good Jews, but there are also terrible Jews, right? There are people doing the right thing. There's people doing the wrong things. We have to always be aligning ourselves with the good and the just and the right. And we can't let any of the chaos block us from that relationship, right? I'll say that this is very hard. And I'll say that in general, my approach to all of this, and I really wanted to end on this, which is, so what do we do when we're surrounded by chaos? For me, the answer is to seek out ways of creating order. My personal platform is through conversations and learning and education. That's where I feel comfortable. For others, it might be in other ways. And it doesn't have to be just this. There are so many things wrong with our world today, right? The question is to find a way in each of our lives. I'll say even just in our own families, are we raising children who are well-read, who are well-educated, who are thoughtful, who see nuance? Do they see nuance? Do they see two sides to things? In our larger family, are we able to maintain our sense of calm and our sense of, I'm going to say, love and understanding? I was telling a friend today, it's so easy to be kind and loving to strangers, but like once you're at a family, like Thanksgiving dinner or Friday night dinner table, like all hell breaks loose, right? These are hard conversations. This is difficult. We all see things very differently, but I think the number one thing is that we just want to be heard. We want to know that somebody hears our point of view and is worried about the things that we're worried about and anxious about the things that we're anxious about. And the answer is, when you really talk it out, 99% of the time, yes, we're all anxious about similar things and worried about similar things. We could do this, guys. We could really do a better job. We could do a better job. I'm going to end on saying what not to do. On a family post, I'm going to call it out. Somebody posted something that said, this is what happens with the Goyim when you don't give them gym classes and they don't go to school. Guys, no, okay? And that's the voice that we have to emerge from together. There are many things we dislike and we hate, and we could talk about that, and we could talk about what we stand against, and we could talk about what we think is wrong, and we could go back and forth about it. Remember your humility. Remember your humanity. All right. Thanks, everyone.